Good evening, everyone. My name is Crystal Atwell, and I serve as the Director of Student Development for APhA. I want to welcome you all tonight to our how-to guide for chapter reporting. We are going to give everybody just a moment to get signed in, and then we will get started. Tonight's presentation is being brought to you by the APhA-ASP Awards Standing Committee. So just a couple of technical notes for the webinar tonight. You are able to type in questions throughout the webinar. Please don't hesitate to do that. We encourage you, as you come up with a question, to type it in either the question box or at the end of the session when we call for questions. If you're in an area where you'd like to ask your question, you can feel free to use the raise your hand function, and we will unmute your line so that you can verbally ask your question. And for everyone, the session is being recorded, and it will be posted following the webinar on pharmacist.com. So with that, I will turn it over to Kelsey Gallego, your APhA-ASP National President-elect and Chair of the Awards Standing Committee.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Kelsey Gallego. Thank you, Crystal. And tonight we have with us the Award Standing Committee members. We have Katie Erickson and Allie Jo Shipman. Unfortunately, we are missing our Vice Chair, Jessica Comstock, because she is currently in London on her APPE rotation. And then we also have the APhA staff, Crystal Atwell, as well as Candace Aller. And now this evening, this is the overview of our presentation. First, we're going to go over the purpose of chapter achievement reports, then the components of the chapter achievement reports. We have the optional and individual awards, how to report submissions, as well as the evaluation process, tips for a successful report, and then, of course, the important links and contact information you will need. So why submit chapter achievement reports? There are many benefits of reporting. It documents your chapter activities. It demonstrates your chapter growth over time and allows you to keep a record of your chapter growth over time. It is also a requirement to maintain your charter. It allows for recognition of chapter activities, and it's an opportunity for everyone to improve and develop their writing skills. It also helps APhA-ASP see the positive impact of student pharmacists on the profession and their communities. And it allows APhA to evaluate student needs for programming at events such as the MRM and annual. So we do have a couple available awards. We have our specialty awards, chapter of the year, as well as our divisional awards. And new this year, we have our operational leadership award, and we'll go into a little bit more detail on that a little bit later. Okay, so now we're going to go into the components of the chapter achievement report. We have the chronological list, the essay, the executive summary, the chapter statistical information online, and this is a form site that you will fill out online and we'll get the information from there. The Constitution and bylaws. Now this only needs to be included if you updated your chapter constitution and bylaws during the reporting cycle. So that includes if you changed any leadership structure or added new positions, then please submit your updated constitution and bylaws. We also have the chapter goals and objectives, as well as the submission confirmation form. So these are the components that you'll want to use as a checklist to make sure that you have everything completed. So the first thing of the report components is the chronological list. This chronological list format is on pharmacist.com. We would greatly appreciate if everyone would look at this format as well as use this format for their chronological list. There are a few older chronological list formats that are floating around, and we would really appreciate if everyone would update it to this one. I did want to point out on the lower right-hand corner, the synopsis. This is less than 75 words per activity, and that is just for the synopsis. So the next report component is the essay. This is one essay composed of 4 sections. It should be submitted as a PDF. The first section is the chapter leadership and operations, and this is where the section where we have the new specialty award, the operational leadership award. Then the patient care, policy and advocacy, as well as professionalism. Now there is a 1,500 word limit per section, and if you would please include the word count at the end of each section, it really helps us. You can review the online guidelines for the components of each of these sections on pharmacist.com. Okay, and the next section we have is operations and leadership. So this goes through the logistics, the structure, the planning of activities. You can include if you added any new leadership positions in this activity, in this section of the report in logistics. And then we have the membership. The fall and spring membership drives. How did you uniquely and creatively recruit members to your chapter? Fundraising. This is the creativity as well as effectiveness. And for all of these components throughout the chapter achievement report, we love to see percentages. So what percentage did you increase in fundraising, and then how did you use those funds at the chapter level? Our next section is the leadership. This is your regional and national promotion, as well as your internal development. So if you had fall or spring leadership retreats, that's where this would go. Membership involvement, recognition, reward, and programming. Did you have a member of the month or a chapter member of the year? That's where this section would go. Chapter meetings. What unique things did you do at your chapter meetings? How much attendance did you have? Again, percentages of your chapter. Communications and public relations. How did you communicate both internally as well as externally? And then your professional relationships. Patient care. Now this includes your participation in Operation Diabetes, Operation Immunization, Operation Heart, OTC Medicine Safety, as well as Generation RX. And on the right-hand side, you'll see the 3 sections that we look at. We look at the innovation of the chapter, what unique projects you had in these areas, as well as the involvement and impact. Again, we really love seeing percentages. And the next section is policy and advocacy. Now I'd like you to take a look at what's included in the policy and advocacy section. This is where we would like to see what your chapter did for American Pharmacists Month, as well as MRM, Annual House of Delegates, your state association meeting, MRM policy proposal, as well as legislative day and outreach. Again, we would like you to address the innovation, involvement, and impact of these. Our next section is professionalism. This is where we like to see things such as SLI, your chapter's attendance at APhA Institute, IPSF, professional development, community service, and again, those collaborative efforts you have. And finally, we're going to look at the additional report component, the executive summary and statistical information. There's a template for this. Follow the template and answer the questions online. You want to have all the information ready, so this is a great opportunity to track your information year-round so you have it all ready to go. Again, constitutions and bylaws if they were updated. Chapter goals and objectives, as well as the submission confirmation form. This should be completed by the chapter advisor, and this is very important because this is where we go as our final check to make sure we have all of the documents that you say you submitted, and we can grade your report appropriately. Optional documents, photographs. Everybody loves pictures. We want them to be high quality, and we want them to be submitted separately from the text document as individual photographs. Now, if you use your photographs in your essay, please cite them correctly so we know what photographs you're talking about and know where to look. Other supporting materials, such as original documents, we want those in PDF format. Videos, we love seeing videos, but if you could put them in an MP4 format, or another format that can be viewed by both Mac and PC. And you can also have scanned newspaper clippings or public relation items included here. And this is also another optional document is the additional reports and award submissions. All right, and now I'm going to turn it over to Ellie Joe, and she's going to go over the additional awards.
Thank you, Kelsey. So in these additional awards, we're going to go over those optional chapter reports that you can submit, as well as the individual awards. So the first optional chapter award that your chapter can submit is the Most Improved Chapter Award. This award report is due July 15th, the same as your chapter achievement report, and it does require a separate award submission. The important thing to remember about this is that it's independent of chapter size or length of charter, so any chapter can submit a chapter award for the Most Improved Chapter. Make sure in your report that you clearly describe improvements in your chapter over the past 3 years. And those improvements can be anything that was improved within your chapter. So any improvements in your structure and operation, the way that you recruited members or the programming that you developed for them, any patient care, policy and advocacy or professionalism activities. Maybe you added a couple of patient care projects, or you really grew in your policy and advocacy section. Maybe you had a lot more members attend APhA-ASP meetings such as MRM or annual. Make sure you include those in the report. As Kelsey talked about earlier, percentages are really important and really help us to determine how much your chapter has improved. So discuss the outcomes, talk about the statistics, and make sure you mention the impact on both your chapter and the community. The second optional chapter award is the Chapter Innovative Programming Award. This one also has a deadline of July 15th and does require a separate award submission. And this one does have qualifying activities related to it. So if you did a single activity or program or a series of activities on a central theme that aren't part of the nationally recognized APhA-ASP projects or programs, then you can apply for the Chapter Innovative Programming Award. So this would be those projects or programs that you've created that are unique to your chapter. And also with this, you want to focus on how you collaborated with others, how involved your chapter was, how you promoted the different events or the different programs that you had, and also the impact that your activity or program had on your members, the community at large, and the profession of pharmacy. The third optional chapter award is the Outstanding IPSF Activity Award, and I want to make sure everyone notices that this deadline is June 1st. The reason we have to have an earlier deadline is because we use all of the information that your chapters submit to compile our national report that we send to IPSF. Because of this, we have to have that earlier deadline so that we can prepare the national report. So please make sure you get in your IPSF reports by that June 1st deadline. These do require a separate award submission. And this is where we want you to explain the accomplishments in the area of your IPSF activities. Sometimes it gets a little confusing with IPSF because several of the IPSF campaigns and initiatives can overlap with the National APhA-ASP projects and programs. So if you think about IPSF in general, their mission is to think globally and to act locally. The IPSF initiatives are really focused on improving public health, both locally and internationally. So if you have activities that are very public health focused, whether they're in your local community, in your state, or internationally, those would be what you would report in the IPSF activity report. You would also want to report any student exchange program activities, whether you hosted students from another country or sent students from your chapter abroad. Also, humanitarian efforts generally fall under IPSF activities such as Vampire Cup, and anything with tuberculosis and smoking cessation generally fall under IPSF activities as well. Make sure you discuss innovations and member engagement and training, how you promoted activities, and again, the impact on local and international communities. Now we're going to move on to the individual awards. And the individual awards all have a deadline of November 1st because you're going to need more time to compile all the materials that you need for these awards. These awards include a letter from a nominator, they require a CV or resume from the applicant, and they also require several letters of support. Most of these require at least 3 letters and have a maximum of 6 letters of support for each of these different awards. The first individual award is the APhA Linwood F. Tice Friend of APhA-ASP Award, and this is for that pharmacist that you know that has a lifetime achievement and dedication to APhA-ASP. So this is that pharmacist that has always been responsive to student pharmacist needs and has promoted the advancement of students within the profession. So this is that pharmacist that you know that has consistently supported students and student pharmacists in the profession. The next award is the APhA-ASP Outstanding Dean Award, and this is where you would nominate your dean if he or she is actively promoting student welfare and made documentable contributions to your APhA-ASP chapter's achievements. The third award is very similar to the second, so the APhA-ASP Outstanding Chapter Advisor Award is very similar to the Outstanding Dean Award, but this is where you would nominate your chapter advisor. So if your chapter advisor is very actively promoting student welfare and has made considerable documental contributions to the achievements of the chapter, make sure that you nominate that chapter advisor for this award. The next individual award is a bit unique in that the APhA-ASP Student Leadership Awards don't just have one winner, but there are 4 student leaders that are recognized every year. These would be the student leaders in your chapter that have both outstanding academic achievement and have demonstrated leadership at the local, regional, and national levels. This is also for those students who are currently in their next to last year of school. So if you have those student pharmacist members of your chapter that are about to go on rotations, they would be eligible for the Student Leadership Award. The final individual award is the APhA Good Government Student Pharmacist of the Year Award, and this is for that student pharmacist that shows outstanding ability to raise awareness of both local and national policy issues while embracing teamwork and collaboration. So this is that student pharmacist that not only raises awareness of local and national policy issues, but also gets your chapter members excited and involved in that policy process and in the national and local policy issues. The important thing to remember about the APhA Good Government Student Pharmacist of the Year Award is to make sure you provide a description of their political activities and or supporting documents for how they have made these contributions and how they are raising awareness of these policy issues within the profession. Here's some general tips for the individual awards. It's very important that you create one PDF document of the entire packet because several of these awards can be used, several of these packets that you submit can be used to renominate your dean or your advisor or the pharmacist for the Linwood F. Tice Award for 4 consecutive years. So if we have one PDF document of the entire packet, it's much easier to keep up with, and we make sure that throughout the years we don't lose any of that documentation. It's also important that you start compiling the letters of recommendation over the summer. As you know, with letters of recommendation, people generally like a good amount of time so that they can write a very strong letter of support for the person that you would be nominating. And it's also important that you include at least one letter from a student, both because diversity is important and because these individual awards are specifically for pharmacists who have really impacted APhA-ASP and are making a positive impact on student pharmacists. So hearing that student voice is very important with these awards. You also want to discuss the topics that are going to be addressed by each nominator or letter writer, because we want to be able to see a full picture of the applicant. So we don't want too much redundancy. We really want to be able to see as much of the person as we possibly can and see a well-rounded image of them. Also, you want to focus on how they meet the criteria by including specific examples. So if you're nominating a dean or chapter advisor, give a specific example of when they really supported your chapter or when they really helped advocate for student pharmacists. If you need more complete information, you can always view the APhA Award Application Guidebook that's online at pharmacist.com. And again, remember that the APhA Good Government and APhA-ASP Student Leadership Awards have specific requirements. So it's a good idea to go back to that guidebook and reference those specific requirements when you're choosing the person that you want to nominate for these awards. For the patient care project reports, it's important to note that Operation Diabetes, Operation Heart, Operation Immunization, and OTC Medicine Safety all have that same general deadline of July 15th with the chapter achievement reports and most of the optional awards, but the Generation RX deadline is January 5th. So please make sure you note the January 5th deadline for the Generation RX report. These reports do have separate reporting guidelines. So for Section 1, you'll have the chapter contact information. Section 2 is the essay. 3 is the chronological list. 4 is the executive summary. And then 5 is the report confirmation. Again, that report confirmation is very important for us to have because that's how we double check to make sure that we've received all of your submissions. The submission process, again, is the same as the chapter achievement report, and we're about to go over how you actually submit these reports. So for your report submission, please, please, please make sure you review all of the documents before you submit them. Once you submit your reports to your Dropbox folder from APhA and we collect them on our end, we can't send them back. So whatever you submit is going to be that final document. Again, you're going to submit them through the Dropbox folder from APhA. So make sure this is not your chapter Dropbox folder or some other Dropbox folder that you have created for your school, but that it is the Dropbox folder that was sent to you from APhA. Each chapter will be invited by APhA to their own folder, and chapter leaders are responsible for ensuring they have access. So now is a really good time to make sure that you have access to your folder. Go ahead and check with your chapter advisor and your previous chapter leaders to get access to that folder. The last thing you want to be worrying about on July 15th is trying to get access to the folder where you're actually supposed to submit all of your report documentation. When you get access to that folder, double check it and make sure that it does contain 5 files for document placement. So you're going to have one for your chapter achievement report, and then you'll have one for each of the 4 patient care projects that will be submitted on July 15th. On January 5th, when you have to submit your Generation RX report, you can create a 6th file for Generation RX. This is the report review checklist, and this is very important to go over, as we talked about earlier, with reviewing your chapter report. Because we have to read so many reports and go through them all, it's very important that all of the chapters stick to the format and style that we've asked. So when you're reviewing your chapter report, go through this checklist and make sure that you can check off all of these boxes. Also make sure you look at the general tips for success, because that will really help you get the most out of your word count especially, and to make sure that you're touching on everything that you need to address in your report. And now I'm going to turn it over to Katie.
Thank you, Allie Jo. So first I want to go over what the report review timeline looks like. So July 15th is when the chapter achievement reports are due. In August, the reports get sent to all of the Awards Standing Committee members to review. Throughout August and November, each member of the Awards Standing Committee independently reads and reviews all of the submitted reports and documents. November 1st is the deadline for the individual awards, and then later in November, the Awards Standing Committee meets in Washington, D.C. to unanimously decide award recipients. In March, review sessions are held with each individual chapter, and awards are presented at the APhA annual meeting. So the chapter performance system is a method to track individual chapter improvement for both APhA-ASP as well as your chapter leadership. So the purpose is to recognize overall chapter performance and identify areas for strength as well as areas for improvement. So the reports are looked at and kind of graded based on a star scale from 0 to 5 stars. So 0 stars means that a report was not submitted. 3 stars means that the chapter report met standard expectations of an APhA-ASP chapter, and 5 stars showing outstanding chapter performance. It's really important that all chapters are submitting a report, and even if a report is submitted with only a title and your name on it, you still get 1 star. So please, please, please submit a report. So when looking at the scale, we are looking at membership, growth and activity, chapter leadership and operations, patient care, policy and advocacy, as well as professionalism. So the overall score is based on an average of all 5 criteria, and we are also looking at continuous improvement throughout the years. And more details on this can be found in Appendix A of the reporting guidelines with a list of star designations for all chapters. So the last topic we're going to cover this evening is how to create a successful report. So you may hear things that have been repeated already and addressed earlier in the presentation. If something's being repeated, please, please, please pay special attention to what's being said, as it's very important. With the reporting system, it's very important to start early and to find a way to make it easier for your chapter to report on all of the awesome things that you're doing. So one way to do this is to create forms, especially for the chronological list, so that that can be updated throughout the year and is not being put together at the last minute. It's also important to establish a timeline for your reports. So it's good to have a check-in mid-year in January to see how things are coming along, if everything is being updated appropriately. So set that timeline and try to stick to it. Also try to designate certain people to write each report and communicate to that individual their responsibilities. So make sure to communicate what to include to reduce redundancy and also to have consistent format through the report. And always, always, always proofread the report. Make sure that several people are looking at the essays, as well as to include people that weren't involved in the writing process. So as we're writing the essays, it's very easy to miss some of the errors. So be sure to have lots of people look at the essays to avoid mistakes. Regarding the chronological list, so this document is single-spaced and events should be organized by date. So please don't break this down into each patient care project. Make sure that all events are listed in chronological order. Also indicate if the event is a new event or a continuing initiative. And for events that occur multiple times, like chapter meetings or executive board meetings, be sure to put that under one entry, but include all of the dates. And you can also do this for multiple blood pressure screenings or anything else that recurs multiple times. Just be sure to include the dates and the locations. Regarding the locations, we don't need the physical address. You can just put the city and the state. That would be sufficient. It's also important to report how many students were at each event, as well as the total students participating for these multiple event listings. So, for example, for chapter meetings, there was an average of 60 students that attended each meeting, and throughout the year, 484 students attended total. It's really important not to double count your members, so make sure that these are 484 different students instead of 60 of the same students coming. So make sure to only count your members once. So this is an example of how to list an individual event and how the chronological list should look after submitting the form. And again, just to point out, the synopsis does have a 75-word limit, and please just be concise in your synopsis, so this isn't a separate essay by any means. It's just a quick summary of the event. Whenever you're telling us about your goals, make sure that they are formal and specific, and also address whether or not the goals were met. We also really want you to collaborate with other organizations, and when you're collaborating with other organizations, be sure to clearly define the role of APhA-ASP within each collaborative event. So what was the role in organizing the event, participating, or having a booth? Be sure to clearly define that. For umbrella organizations, please be sure to include only the events that were initiated or conducted by APhA-ASP. And also, please specifically identify how many APhA-ASP members were present at each event representing APhA-ASP. So just some tips for the writing style. It's really important to be aware of grammar and spelling. So this is a formal essay, and grammar and spelling are important, so please pay close attention to that. Try to avoid laundry lists or fluff with no detail. Make sure that you're utilizing that word count efficiently. Make sure to spell out acronyms and abbreviations first, so avoid EWARD or PD1. Be sure not to use any lone ASP. So ASP is one of 3 academies belonging to the larger American Pharmacists Association, so it's always APhA-ASP. In addition, don't use first-person point of view, so don't use I's or U's. So you guys are a chapter and you're reporting as a chapter. It's also important to avoid using individual names within the report. If you had an outreach visit from a National Executive Committee member, we definitely want to hear about that. Go ahead and throw their name in there. But try not to include names from chapter members just because we aren't aware of their role within the chapter, and so it can be a little bit confusing to us when we're reading that section, when we're reading that information. Again, use your word count to discuss what the chapter did, how they did it, and why. It's important to be engaging in the essay and also to be concise. Also, again, please use percentages rather than numbers when reporting growth and member involvement in the essay. This helps us to better identify how the chapter is growing. So formatting is really important because when we're going through all of the essays, when formatting changes occur, it can cause a lot of distraction. So pay close attention to formatting. Make sure only to submit PDFs, so make sure that it's one essay with 4 sections in it. Be sure not to submit Word documents. Make sure that the essay is double-spaced, except for the chronological list, of course, and make sure you're using 10-point font. Don't forget to include a word count at the end of each section, and again, we will stop reading after 1,500 words, so don't exceed that word count. Be sure to have 1-inch margins, and be sure to label the document appropriately as well. You do not need to create any sort of cover or title pages. If you have submitted a photo or have a supporting document, be sure to use a superscript to reference that item in the essay, and then use endnotes at the end of the essay to define it. Make sure that all font size and formatting is consistent between each sections, and also be sure to provide spacing between each section in order for us to have a little bit of room to take some notes in there as well. And also remember to inactivate track changes, so be sure that you don't have any red font in there or highlighting or any sort of things that were supposed to grab your attention saying, hey, I needed to go back and fix that. Be sure to make sure you're submitting the final draft. So what are some items that are commonly left out of reports that we really want to see? So the first is general chapter meeting descriptions. So let us know, were speakers brought in, what sort of activities took place, what sort of discussions were had, how was the attendance? We want to know all of these things. Also provide a brief executive board structure overview, and this is where a diagram or picture can be very useful because then you don't have to use up your word count explaining your executive board structure. Also be sure to address the level of member involvement and engagement. Did members help plan events or did they attend them? Let us know what they did. Be sure to address fundraising efforts of your chapter and then discuss how those funds were used. So did the funds go towards buying equipment for health fairs or providing lunch at general meetings? Also, let us know about public relations. How do you communicate within your chapter? How do you communicate with the public? And how are your events promoted, both within your chapter and to the public? We also want to hear about professional relationships and the chapter member engagement with them. So be sure to address those. If you're involved with the new practitioner network, don't forget to address that. Be sure to report on the National Patient Counseling Competition involvement. So did you have a local competition? How did that person get to the national level? How did they do? Did they win the National Patient Counseling Competition? Let us know. We want to hear that. And also don't forget to report on IPSF activities and involvement as well. So just some general tips. Reviewing the past two reports really helps you to understand what this chapter has done in the past and also gives an idea of what the report should look like. It's important to avoid excessive use of analogies, repeated words in the same sentence or paragraph, and also to avoid acronyms. Be sure to turn in the correct version of the report. Make sure that it's the correct year, that you didn't accidentally submit last year's report. Make sure that there aren't any notes that you're going to go back and fix in the report. Make sure it's the final version. Again, please don't exceed the word limit. Avoid fluff, avoid too much bolding and underlining, as this can be very distracting. And really with these essays, less can be more. It's much better to have 900 words of a concise description than 1,500 words of fluff. And then don't use your word count to describe activities that are universally known like SLI or MRM. We're familiar with these events and what occurs here, so talk more about your involvement and engagement in these activities instead. It's really important to focus on the positive. Avoid being negative even when explaining setbacks. So we want to hear about the challenges that you overcame throughout the year, but again, focus on those positives. Make sure to use pictures that add to the report and be sure to cite them correctly. Again, it's important to use high quality photos, especially because these pictures are often what we are using to show at annual meeting. Be sure to include sufficient information, as the committee may not know about local pharmacy chains or community issues as well. Also, be sure to explain if a project is new or if it's pre-existing, and discuss how your chapter was involved in each event. Also, be sure, again, to clearly define the role of APhA-ASP within an umbrella organization. And finally, be sure only to discuss your completed projects, not your plans for future projects. So just some summary do's and don'ts. So do be concise. Make sure to have multiple people review the report. Be sure only to submit PDFs. Make sure that everything is formatted correctly. Make sure to complete all the requirements and to use high quality photos. Don't tell us how great pharmacy is or the prevalence impact of a disease unless it's local within the community. Don't wait until the last minute to start. Don't repeat items in this section or something that's been addressed in previous sections. And don't duplicate pictures or supporting documents. So that's all I have for report writing tips. Here's the contact information for each of the members on the Awards Standing Committee. And if you still have questions after this webinar, feel free to contact us. You can also look online at pharmacist.com at the chapter achievement report information, as well as the communication style guideline. If you have additional questions after that, feel free to contact Crystal or Candace. And with that, we will now be opening it up for questions.
All right, thank you, ladies. We do have a couple of questions that have come in already. So the first one is a request to flip back to the slide on the chronological list and do a quick review on the formatting of the chronological list. So Allie, if you could bump us back to that slide, and then I think Katie, that was in your portion, if you want to go through that.
Yeah. So if you have an individual event, this is what the entry should look like. So have the name of the event first. Make sure to identify, is this an operational project? Is this a professionalism project? Is this patient care? List the date of the event. If this occurred multiple times, here's where you would put in all of the dates through which the event occurred. Put the location, so was this done at your College of Pharmacy? Was this done at a Walgreens? That's where you can put that information. How did you promote that event? Was that done through word of mouth? Was that done through announcements? Be sure to put the target audience. So who are you really trying to reach out to? It's important to know the faculty that was there, as well as pharmacists and chapter members. Again, if this is a recurring event, you can put 4 students per event, and then in parentheses the total number of students that attended throughout all of the events if it's recurring. If it's a patient care project event, we really want to know how many patients were reached and how many attended the event. So that information is important to document as well. And then it can be hard to know how many patients you've reached through your public relations, but trying to estimate that is also helpful. Again, we talked about collaboration, so it's important to know, did APhA-ASP do this on its own? Did it do it with another group? So let us know that. For the event type, that's where you would put in if it's a recurring event or if it's a new initiative. And then we also want to know how much time you spent planning the event and the hours at the event. So we know that a lot of work goes into planning these different events and projects, and so we really want you to be able to document that information. And then the synopsis is just a brief overview of what took place at that event as well.
And then Katie, for the synopsis, does there need to be a word count at the end of that?
It's nice if there is a word count, because then we don't have to guess, look, oh, that's more than 75 words. So if you have a word count at the end of the synopsis, that would be very beneficial for us.
All right. Our next question, next couple questions, just as a reminder, you will be able to access this webinar after this evening. It will be posted on pharmacist.com in the chapter achievement report section within APhA-ASP's portion of the website. So that will be available for you to listen to the recording or to share with your fellow chapter officers. And speaking of that, our next question is that for many chapters, this is a time of transition, or it's about to be, as their new chapter leaders are coming in. So as part of the transition process, what recommendations do you guys have for getting them through the chapter achievement reporting?
I can take that.
Hi,
one.
this is Kelsey.
Or Kelsey.
I'll say something and you can add on if you'd like. But I think that open lines of communication is the most vital piece of success to a good transition. So being able to show your successors, if they are not able to be on the webinar this evening, where to find the webinar on pharmacist.com so that they can watch it and have that information, as well as just keeping documents and having past reports available for them to look at and read. That would be my biggest advice.
Yeah, I definitely agree with what Kelsey said. Also, incorporating the award report, your chapter achievement report, into your transition meeting that you would have would be very beneficial, so that way that your incoming officers, if they have any questions, they have the outgoing officers right there to ask. Again, like Kelsey said, showing them this webinar, making sure they know where to go on pharmacist.com to find the guidebook for the chapter achievement reports. Those are all really good ways to make sure that you prepare your incoming officers Also, if you make sure that you set up things for them, like creating a Google Doc for the chronological list, and kind of set up some of those foundations for them, that would also be helpful.
All right, so our next question, I think this was in your section, Allie Jo. Would you mind talking a little bit about the difference between the patient care section of the Chapter Achievement Award Report versus the individual patient care projects?
Sure. So the Chapter Achievement Report patient care section is really almost more of an overview than the individual reports are. So we see, the awards committee sees the patient care section of your Chapter Achievement Report. We do not see the individual patient care project reports. So don't worry about doubling up on information between those two, because the awards standing committee only sees the Chapter Achievement Report and what you report in your patient care section. So that's really where you want to include especially a lot of statistics about your patient care projects. You want to include, again, like your member engagement overall within your patient care projects. You want to talk about the % increase from year to year, but you also want to make sure that in the Chapter Achievement Report, you really hit those highlights as well from each of your patient care projects. So you might not necessarily need to go into all of the details about each event that you held. That's what the chronological list is for. But again, the Chapter Achievement Report is what the Awards Standing Committee sees, and then some of the other standing committee members review your individual patient care reports.
And just to add to what Allie Jo mentioned, so in the Chapter Achievement Report in the patient care section, that's also your opportunity to talk about your unique patient care projects that you wouldn't have the opportunity to talk about in the individual patient care project reports.
All right, so we know that chapter events are often multifunctional, and there may be advocacy incorporated into patient care and health fairs. There may also be media that's happening there. So in terms of events that have multiple components involved, how do chapters go about deciding what goes where in terms of report section?
I can take that one, Crystal. This is something that can be a bit difficult, and every chapter struggles with this, so certainly don't feel like you're alone in trying to figure out which section exactly you should put it in. What's really helpful is focusing on whatever aspect that is supposed to be in that report. So if maybe you do a health fair at your state capitol, and so you want to report on the advocacy part that you did in the policy and advocacy section, but you also want to report it as a health fair under patient care. In that case, what you could do is you could mention in the patient care section that it was held at a state capitol, but you really want to go more into detail about what the health fair actually did, and you want to give more statistics on the health fair as far as how many people you reached, how many screenings you did, or sort of what the educational materials and education that you did. So you want to go into that aspect of it. And then again, you could mention in the policy and advocacy section that you did a health fair, but in that section you would want to talk more about your advocacy efforts at the Capitol, at the state capitol on that level. So mentioning those connections between the reports is okay. We just don't want to see you use up your word count in your patient care section describing your advocacy at the Capitol when really you want to put that in your policy and advocacy section. Does that make sense?
I think it does, Allie. I think it also kind of reinforces the importance of the chronological list, is where you really have an opportunity to showcase everything, and using your word count there in your synopsis description is even more important than for the award standing committee. All right, so our next question is related to the Dropbox account. So this one I'll answer for you. When we started utilizing Dropbox, which I think was around 4 years ago now, that was the first time that we emailed each chapter leader at that time and the chapter advisors. So it was an invitation from us to your chapter, and that is your official Dropbox account. Now, if you're not sure if it's your official Dropbox account, one of the ways that you can check is to make sure that you're sharing with APhA-ASP at aphanet.org, email address that you'll see. And you can always shoot us an email if you're unsure of the process. But your former chapter officers, as well as your advisor, should all have access. And as part of your transition process should be inviting the new officers in and removing any officers that might be graduating or leaving their position as you choose. It's your choice who has access to that. But that's how you'll submit chapter achievement reports, secure reports, including Generation RX. And also, if we need FarmFlix videos from you, if you participate in that process, we also utilize Dropbox in that way. So as the committee mentioned earlier in the webinar, just make sure that you know which Dropbox is whose Dropbox and that you're using the right one for your submission process. So in relation to the writing and completion of the chapter achievement reports, that's the focus of our next question. So do most chapters have their outgoing or incoming officers complete the chapter achievement report? And I can fill in with a recommendation that staff usually provide. You want the people that participated and ran the event to be integral in writing your report. If you were there, you know what happened, you know how to adequately describe it. The hope is that when you sit down to write your report, your chronological list is already done. And so you're really just then focusing on writing those essay sections. But it's good for the people who were there and did it to be the people that are writing it. Now, that being said, I highly encourage you to have your incoming officers be a part of the process in terms of editing and reviewing. It gives them good insight into how things were done, but it also gives them a preview of what they're going to what they'll need to do as they write the reports in the coming year. So if they see some areas where they might want to change things up or implement reporting throughout the year kind of process for your chapter, they'll get a preview of that and will be able to improve your reports as they go through their year as well. All right. And so then from your experience, the Award Standing Committee, how much time should chapters plan to allocate for report writing?
I could probably...
I would say
Go ahead.
I would say the more time, the better. This is something that you can do on a continuous basis throughout the year, and that can take whatever form you'd like. If you want to keep your chronological list on a Google Doc so that your executive committee team can see it and collaborate, you can keep in mind and keep jotting down things that you want to include in your chapter achievement report, but at least give yourself, I would say, a month to be able to write your first draft, and then that way you can get a lot of different eyes looking at it, a lot of feedback from people that you want to review your report, and just to make sure that you have time to reflect on it and make sure you include all of the pieces that you wanted to incorporate for the year.
And also it can be helpful too to kind of be working on it throughout the year, especially with the chronological list, but also with other areas of the report as well, especially with some of the operations and leadership stuff that can be done throughout the year. And the more time that you spend on the front end of writing the reports at the beginning of the year, the less that you have to worry about that at the end too.
I would also stress that it's important that you outline your timeline with your advisors. Chapter advisors are required to review and sign off on your final reports. So make sure you double check with them about their timeline. The July 15th time frame is right after the 4th of July holiday. It's also around the time for the AACP meeting, and a number of your faculty members go to that, so they may be out of pocket. So make sure that you're including your advisors in the process. New practitioner mentors are another great resource in terms of reviewing, though they can't officially sign off on your report. And I'd also put out there, just in case you haven't noticed it yet, the July 15th deadline is going to coincide with our Summer Leadership Institute. So make sure that you're keeping that in the back of your mind if you are going to be attending SOI and you'll have a role in your chapter achievement report writing. All right, so it looks like we've answered all of the questions, at least for now. We hope that this information was helpful. You see contact information there listed on the screen, but again, we will be posting the webinar on pharmacist.com. So I'm going to turn it over to Kelsey to close us out.
Thank you, Crystal. I just want to thank the Awards Standing Committee for all the hard work that you guys did this year, and all of you, all of the chapter leadership that you have done this past year and that you're going to continue to do this next year. I look forward to seeing what reports and what great activities you do this upcoming year, and thank you for spending your evening with us. Have a good day, everybody.